Joining us is Dr. Alexey Muraviev, who is Associate Professor of National Security and Strategic Studies at Curtin University. It's good to see you again. So this is escalating now, isn't it? From 2 captured to an alleged 150 plus others and maybe even more. How significant is President Zelensky's claim?
Look, I think we need to treat this claim with caution. I'm not saying that the Chinese are not there. I'm actually surprised that we haven't seen them. We haven't seen them in the media before. And in fact, the Russians were quite open about having the Chinese fighting alongside them for quite some time. I mean, last month, a couple of Russian defense bloggers were actually posting videos showing the Chinese nationals geared up in Russian combat fatigue and fully armed, undertaking some maneuverings in certainly one of the places. There've been evidence or photographic evidence to suggest that China's made military equipment like armored vehicles were utilized by the Russians in the conflict. So again, this is not a groundbreaking news, and certainly it's not groundbreaking from the point of being disseminated by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, given the fact that thousands of foreign mercenaries or volunteers have been fighting in Ukraine alongside the Ukrainian regular militaries since the start of the conflict. So we're talking about 150 or so Chinese nationals, if they're all accounted for, fighting on the Russian side, and obviously they wouldn't be the only foreign nationals who would be fighting for Russia. And you have something in the range of 7,000 to 16,000 foreign nationals fighting for Ukraine as part of the so-called Ukraine's Foreign Legion. So it's yet another indication that this regional war has attracted quite a few players that take role in partaking in this conflict in a variety of ways, ranging from providing economic or military aid to effectively sending their citizens. And yes, countries that would send their citizens would obviously do it with a state of denial, obviously not claiming responsibility for having their nationals fighting for either side. The final point I want to make, we also need to remember that the Chinese companies have been supplying certain parts of military hardware or dual-use technologies such as drones, not just to the Russians, but also to the Ukrainians. So the Chinese are actually playing an interesting part here, and not necessarily doing all in Russia's favor.
And if they are to be on the field with the Russian forces, what damage could these purported 155 or more mercenaries do to Ukraine in this war? I mean, I recall the time when we were talking about the North Korean troops. Their numbers are said to hardly make a dent in the war. So how could these new troops be deployed? What would the implications be on the conflict?
None. As simple as that. 150 troops will not make a difference to the war that sees at least 500,000 fighting troops on each side confronting each other along some 2,000 kilometers of the front line. I mean, Ukraine's latest claims that the Russians managed to achieve successes in the Kursk region because North Koreans have been reposted to the front line and they are now at least better trained and have better readiness to fight a modern conflict. While one once again can question the validity of these claims, but clearly reinforcing the Russian military by say 100-200 or even 2,000 to 3,000 additional personnel, it's not going to be a game changer. It's more of a symbolic gesture, but once again, even the symbolism of having Chinese nationals fight for the Russians is not as massive as it. As Zelenskyy is trying to present it to be, compared, for example, of how many Polish nationals are fighting for the Ukrainians or alongside the Ukrainians, and we're talking about thousands of them, and yet they are not really making huge difference on the battlefield.
Dr. Muraviev, I just have some dying, minutes with you, so I want to squeeze in to help me out with Ukraine saying that recruitment is via social media. You hear this about jihadis. How probable is this allegation? And can social media impact warfare today?
The social media can have an impact as far as a useful tool to spread propaganda, information, or disinformation. So in terms of affecting the minds and influencing the hearts of people of a target nation, or even over in your own people, yeah, that's a very useful tool. Yes, it can be used for recruitment, and obviously we're not talking about official channels being utilized for recruitment. Clearly, social media is one of ways to go, which has been utilized by both sides of the conflict. So, and you have pointed out that this is something, for example, terrorists have been using for years, if not longer. So once again, it's not something revolutionary, it's not something new, and it's certainly not going to be a game changer in the war.
And finally, we've got to talk about China, because they are denying the allegations. But how long do you suppose they can stay neutral on this?
Well, I'm not really sure that we can call the Chinese neutral. I mean, they have a vested interest in the conflict. On one hand, they want the conflict to be over because it really creates problems for China as the global powerhouse. They would rather see trade going than conflict. On the other hand, it's an opportunity for the Chinese military, for the PLA, to learn something from not just from the Russians, but from the way how this war has been fought, because the Chinese don't have the same combat experience as the Russians. So that fact alone would inevitably see the Chinese trying to obtain data and ideally first-hand experience by effectively closing a blind eye on those who may want to join the Russian military, and then come back and share their first-hand experience with the Chinese regulars, or they certainly would be interested in profiteering from the conflict. They are selling lots of things to the Russians. They support Russia economically by intensifying bilateral trade. But as I said before, the Chinese, or not the Chinese officials, but the Chinese companies do provide some logistical support to the Ukrainians. So in fact, they try to play, two sides of the conflict and make the profit by having an opportunity to sell something to the sides that are fighting each other.
Okay, thank you so much for your insight, Dr. Alexey Muraviev, who's Associate Professor of National Security and Strategic Studies at Curtin University.